When I got up there, it was like weight had shifted. It's another layer. It's another of you peeling back just what grief is like, like you're peeling away some of the exterior that you built for yourself to get through stuff. So that was a really great moment to just have a moment to let go and talk about what happened.
Hi, I'm Candice, and I'm going to tell you a secret. When I was 5 years old, my dad died of a drug overdose. He was 25. I'm 40 now, and all my life I've never met anyone else who's lost a parent to drug overdose. But I have a funny feeling I probably have. They just never told me, and I never told them. It's hard to talk about. I don't want people to judge my dad for the way that he died. I don't want them to think that he was careless or irresponsible or that he deserved it, because he didn't. I don't want people to think that I grew up in a really bad environment, because I didn't. I don't want people thinking that I want sympathy either, because I don't. I just want acknowledgement. And I want to hear stories from people like me. About 6 months ago, I scoured the internet, Google, YouTube, searching for people sharing their stories. I could only find a handful, and I reached out to them, and they were kind enough to come on this show. I'm so grateful for them. I'm running out of people to interview, so if you want to share your story, visit kidsofo.com. That's KIDSOFO.com. I'd love to hear from you. Today is the anniversary of my dad's death, and it's also the first episode. Thank you for listening to Kids of Overdose. Enjoy.
My name is Cass, short for Cassandra. I am from Connecticut. I live in Cromwell with my husband Brendan and our very elderly cat. I'm almost 27. My birthday is on Tuesday. So,
Oh, happy pre-birthday.
been living in Connecticut all my life, and I graduated college from Central Connecticut State University, my undergrad in political science. So I currently work in state politics. And so that's kind of where my career is at. And I am pursuing a master's now in public administration at UConn.
That's awesome. So, why we're talking today, Cass, you are a survivor. You've lost a parent to overdose, and actually, you've had experiences with both your parents. And so, we're so honored to hear your story.
Yeah, thank you. And I appreciate you doing this. And our stories get not talked about a lot, especially children who face a death of their parent from an overdose. But yeah, like you said, I lost actually both my parents. Growing up, it was always a fear of mine of losing one of them in a way that, like an overdose, as traumatic as it is, and I ended up, losing both, unfortunately. And
What was it like finding out about how your mom passed away?
I was just newly 19. We were living in an apartment and I was home for the week because it was like, I think a week or two before my spring semester for my sophomore year. The night before, my mom had picked me up from my now husband's house, and she had not been feeling great. But it was a pretty normal evening. And in the morning, I had woken up really late, and I realized she didn't go to work. My mom was self-employed, so she kind of made her own hours, but it was like super late. As a college student, I'd be sleeping in. But yeah, and then unfortunately, like when I went to try to go wake her up, she was unresponsive. That's like a day that I will never forget. And at the time, I didn't know how she had passed away. I found her like as if she had passed in her sleep. So she at least looked very peaceful. But when we found out it was actually an overdose, that was kind of unexpected.
Before this, how's your relationship with your mom? What was your mom like?
My mom was a tough cookie, but she was awesome. Like my mom was like that mom that was there for all my friends who, if they couldn't talk to a parent or a family member, like she was like their person. to confide in and tell certain things to. And she just was a big caregiver. Like her job, she was a cleaning lady. She cleaned homes for a living, and as unglamorous as that job is, she really touched the lives of her customers, and she had some loyal people and loyal families that kept her around for years cleaning their home. And our relationship was rocky though, like once in a while. I'm an only child and she was a single mom trying to just figure out how to raise me in a world that isn't always supportive of single parents. So
And
she,
plus, you're a teenager, and we go through
yeah,
all
exactly.
that craziness.
Right. Yeah. And so definitely in my teenage years we butted heads too a lot because I had figured out that she, was an alcoholic like very early on in my childhood. And I was always challenging her on that, if I was indirect or direct. And, a lot of our arguments had stemmed from her being drunk or, just saying stupid things to each other. So, but when I went off to college, it was like it changed something. I think because of like just some time and space away from each other, it was like the best. That whole 2016 was like right before she died. That whole year, I would say, was like the best year probably of our relationship. We had gotten so close over the summer. And I thought she was doing well. I thought she was not drinking as much and was clean, but things happen.
Yeah, it's like a gift that, at least for that year before she passed, you got to get really closer with her and you butted heads less. How nice is that? That's a good thing. There was a news article that you were speaking at an event in Connecticut for International Overdose Awareness Day. You said that the perspectives of the children is not talked about enough, and you mentioned about how many children who's lost a parent to overdose.
I'm lucky to work in a space where my boss is an elected official and has a pretty large platform being a statewide constitutional. So, part of my job is I handle his schedule and I always have eyes out for things going on in the state, especially regarding mental health and addiction. That's one of his passions as a politician. And so when we were trying to figure out what we were doing for International Overdose Awareness Day, usually an agency in Connecticut will put on a large event and have invite a ton of great organizations, nonprofits in the state to speak. And for some reason, just wasn't happening this year. And so our office kind of took the reins and said, let's do a press conference outside the state capitol in Connecticut. And I have some really great coworkers who know my story and were like, we should have you speak, Cass. And at first I was like, are you sure? Just because like I have a lot of respect for all the other folks that were a part of that program and in terms of like speaking order for that day. But yeah, my boss was super validating, was like, no, like you should definitely speak. Um, I was like, all right, I guess we're doing this. It was great because I think a lot of the times in those spaces, we hear from parents of children who passed away from an overdose. And I, like you, have spent hours on the internet trying to find like forums or like any type of data, literally anything that points to, a person or a group of children who have lost a parent to an overdose. And
Mhm.
we're not often talked about, or not in the sense that we're actively speaking. It's just that platform doesn't is not as wide spread as parents who have lost a child. So I felt like that was a big thing as to what I wanted to speak about that day, because again, like there's not many who are speaking
Yeah.
about it.
How
And
did it make you feel like when you were doing it or like afterwards?
when I got up there, it was like this like weight had shifted. It's another layer. It's another, of you peeling back just what grief is like, like you're peeling away some of the exterior like that you built for yourself to get through stuff. So that was a really great moment to just have a moment to let go and talk about what happened.
It's great that you took the courage to do that because not a lot of people share that story. And yeah, oftentimes I even see like in different articles where it's talking about addiction and how people will pass and oh and then they'll leave children behind and the children need a lot of support. But then I feel like then that's the end of the article.
Yep.
That's the story, the end. But it's not the end. It's a beginning for us to go through this whole new stage of our life. And there's a lot of shame and stigma around it. When that happened to your mom, like, were you able to like tell people or did it become like a secret? I know that you said that you were very grateful that you were able to get support from your school.
Yeah, so while at the time I was going back to school for my spring semester, my sophomore year, and I was a very involved student. Anything I could be a part of, I was a part of, especially student government. That's actually how I
Oh,
now have been. And I often think about how after that she had passed, like I don't really know how I would have gotten through that initial first couple months because without the support that I got from my campus community, like I had a lot of great people who, when I told them like what happened, they were like, that's crazy. Like I'm here for you. Like whatever you need, like I'm here,
yeah. What kind of things do you think were really helpful for you that maybe someone else who goes through this could be helpful for them as well?
Yeah, I think lean on your people is like a big thing that helped me a lot. And don't be afraid to tell someone when you're really struggling. Like I can say like my mental health like completely plummeted after that, especially trying to get back into school. It was really tough for me academically. That semester I ended up having to withdraw from two of my classes and I failed the other two. It was something that I really struggled with because getting to class was just even a chore, and what I would say to somebody, like, especially if they're in a place where you are continuing school or you're just trying to get to your job or,
Hmm.
whatever's going on. Again, I would say lean on your people because, that's ultimately what got me through it. It's like all the support system that I had.
What was your relationship with your dad?
Yeah, so my dad, it was different. It was like we were still super close, but not in like a father-daughter way. It was like just because he struggled all my life with his addiction and there was never a time where things felt really good and established for him. He just never could really, unfortunately, just didn't get the opportunity to become clean and stay clean. There were definitely times where there was missed birthday parties, missed holidays, which affected me a lot as a kid. And by the time I was an adult, it was like we talked a lot still. We had a good relationship, but it was like one of my good friends. It wasn't like this is like a parental figure to me. Don't get me wrong, there were definitely times where in lessons that I learned from my dad that you would usually learn from a dad or a mom, like, or a parent figure. And I'm still grateful for that. Like my dad was the first person to teach me how to ride a bike. Like
Aw.
he was the one who introduced me to like hiking and going on outdoors and sports was a huge thing. Like that was like how we related. It was like, when I growing up I loved soccer and he was like a huge athlete in high
Oh, that's
school. So
awesome.
those were the ways that we were able to connect and I still think of him as like that's my dad. It was never like you're kind of around and because the people have relationships like that, when you're in addiction and your parents in addiction, like it can be tough to remain like in a healthy relationship with them. But I never really resented him. I think
That's good.
yeah, there's definitely and I totally understand people who have strained relationships. I would say there was only a few times where, if he had been using, and it became difficult, but unlucky for my mom because I lived with her, I experienced way more traumatic things with her, unfortunately. So my dad definitely got the better end of the stick with that, whereas like a lot of the times it was always like positive around him. So I think that helps a little bit with, our relationship.
Were your parents really young when they got together?
My mom was 21 when she had me with my dad and they were definitely young and they were in their early 20s and they had just started like dating. I think they got pregnant with me like maybe like 5 months after
Oh,
getting together. So, yeah, and they weren't engaged, they weren't married. So I definitely was not the plan. But I think they did try it. Like they tried to figure it out. Especially after they got, they found out they were pregnant. And my dad had proposed to my mom and all this stuff, and they lived together for like the first year of my life, but it just didn't work out. Like my dad was actively, you know, that's kind of the turning point was around that time. He had his own business and was doing lawn care, and with all this influx of money that he hadn't had before,
okay.
had already was kind of abusing painkillers, but then it escalated because he had like that access to more cash. And that's when my mom was like, nope, we're not this isn't a healthy relationship. And
Yeah.
so she kind of, I think around the age I was like maybe around 2 is when they split.
Did you ever feel hesitant or embarrassed to tell about what happened with your parents, or like maybe you're not very open with it because it's not necessary, or I don't know, like what is that like? Do you wait
Yeah.
till you're really you only tell like really good friends about it, or
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when my mom first, when we found out about her passing away, there was a conversation between me and my grandma, her mother, with when we had like the death certificate in our hands and like the cause of death. And at the time, she was resistant to wanting to be open about it. She was like, I don't want our family to think that your mom had an issue or just or died in this way because I don't want them to think differently about them. And I had said to her, I remember saying to her something along the lines like, I'll respect that for you, but like eventually, and in my circles, I'm going to tell like what happened just because it I can't live like not saying anything to people. It's just a part of me where I will always be truthful about how, she passed and how my dad passed. And over time, I think it's become easier to tell folks, but like it's not something that casually really comes up in conversation. But
yeah.
when it does, I'm usually honest. And when my dad died, it was a different experience because his mom, my grandma, we knew instantly, like, that it was an overdose. It wasn't like we had to wait to find out with the autopsy. Like we knew right away that it was that. And in his obituary, she wrote his obituary, and one of the first things was, that he had passed from his lifelong struggle with addiction. And I will always be grateful for that because she was never really shy to tell people. Even when my dad was alive and struggling, she wasn't really ever shy about saying, this is our reality. Because I think she really wanted my dad to get better and felt that she was a part of helping him get better. And I think her putting that in his obituary too, it was a sense of relief for her because there wasn't a question, it wasn't an awkward conversation. People just knew that, my dad had an issue, and
Hmm.
unfortunately passed the way he did, but we could talk about it. It wasn't something that was hidden.
There's a lot of stigma around addiction, but when you lose like a close relative, maybe your perspective on it changes a little bit.
I think especially after my mom, it was a shock because I didn't realize that she had been also abusing painkillers and drinking on top of that. So that's ultimately why she passed, because of the mix of the two. And so when I think about addiction in situations like that, like you just really never know. Like people can really put on a big front, like come across as a healthier person or like a clean person, and you just wouldn't know. So yeah, so definitely I've definitely felt more empathetic to people in their situations and their stories, and reasons as to why they do, and it's a coping mechanism for some folks, like to just deal with like past traumas or unresolved things that happened to them. And so I would never judge somebody who kind of fell into the cycle, because you just never know why, and there can be really traumatic reasons behind their usage. I think that's part of what is going to help people is if more people were empathetic and saw it as a disease, because that's what it is. And, it's not always a choice for somebody. It's a tough situation, and I think if people viewed it and as a disease, we would be helping, I think, a lot more people, and there wouldn't be as much stigma behind, and people would get the help that they need.
Well, I think there could be maybe some positive things we can get from each other when you go through trauma and get to the other side of it.
Right.
I think that's like the process. Like once you can get to the other side of it, there's some good waiting for you. Like, do you think that you've changed in any way, like your personality or just anything that's changed you after your parents died the way they did?
Having to grow up in a space where with my mom, like always seeing the struggles behind like what happened, like closed doors, the what the big ugliness is of addiction, and just telling myself like I'm not putting myself through that. I want to be a healthy parent whenever that time comes around. I just want to do something important. We're not just a number, and we have purpose and we have value. And something definitely after both of them passing away, both my parents passing away, I talked a lot about like trying to find my purpose. This happened, and it happened for a reason, I feel like, because I eventually now, like, I have like this drive to do some type of work in the field. That's why I'm going back to school. I'd love to like opening a nonprofit or just doing some type of addiction recovery work or helping children like us do scholarships like for high school students who have lost a parent. If it's
Yeah.
anything like that, it's given me that like a weird resilience. Yeah, like that it's unexplainable. When you go through something like that, you're seeing a part of life that is unimaginable, and especially because there isn't a lot of resources like we've talked about, like you kind of find ways to go through it and grieve, and yeah, I think, and just dig in. I think a lot of us have this grit that you just kind of see life in a different perspective, and it makes you want to do better and do things, I think, for people. Like I have this, like it gave me a drive to want to help people.
It
So,
almost it changes the legacy of your parents. Now look at their daughter and all these great good things she's doing. Like you get
right.
to turn it into a positive story. It's gonna make them proud. I'm constantly trying to make my dad proud. Whenever I made mistakes, I would apologize to him all the time, mostly in my 20s. Once I hit 30s, I was making a lot less mistakes and I don't find myself apologizing to him anymore, which is great. But yeah, just trying to make them proud that it didn't all happen for nothing.
Something I would say too is I living with my mom and seeing her at her worst as an alcoholic, and going through all those things, and just seeing what alcohol especially could just do to a person during the pandemic. It was a weird time, and me and my husband, we had just bought our home. I graduated college, thankfully, but I couldn't find like a job that made sense right away. And with all these factors, like and just being isolated because of the pandemic, I was drinking a lot more. And as a college student, like, and that this doesn't get talked a lot enough too, is like college students like binge drinking and getting into situations that are not good for them, and that translating into after college and their adult life. And I just never thought that I'm good. Like that wouldn't happen with me. But yeah, like I found myself bored and like would drink because I was bored, or just like drink excessively whenever we had friends over or whatever. I started to realize, I was like, okay, like these are like cycles that I grew up seeing that I told myself I wouldn't go through. And it took one night where I had way too much to drink, and my husband was like, listen, you do not want to be like your mom or your dad, like this is
Aw.
an issue now, like we need to have a serious talk when you're sober in the morning. And I remember waking up that morning being like, all right, like both of them are gone. Both my parents are gone. I can't follow the same path, you know. I just
Yeah.
so I remember I called my grandma, my dad's mom, and was like, I'm calling you because I need you to hold me accountable. I'm not drinking ever again. And she was like, what? Like, I didn't even know you had an issue. And I was like, I haven't hit like what we call like a rock bottom. And I use that in quotations because like everybody's recovery journey is different. But, you know, I didn't have like a problem or like an issue that happened like in comparison to like my mom or dad. But I realized I have to live a sober life. I'm proud to say that I have been clean and sober like in the last 4 years.
Does anything ever remind you of them? Like whether it's like a song or anything that reminds you or resonates with you to think of them?
Something that was really important to me and my family when my mom died was, you know, when you go to she was Catholic, and when you go to like a wake, like at a funeral home, usually they play that really like somber music. And something that we had asked them was like, are we allowed to play whatever we want?
Oh my God, I love that.
Why not? I was like, okay, great. Um, we ended up playing like she loved to sing, my mom, and so we put together a CD that like played like a lot of like some of her favorite songs, some of the songs that reminded me of her, like some of the songs that reminded like my
Oh,
other family and her friends of her, and we
yeah.
created like a playlist that I listen to once in a while, but there's this song called Your Song.
Elton John.
Yes.
Love that.
Growing up, my mom used to sing it to me and was like, "This is our song, this is
Oh,
our song." Um, so that is definitely a big thing. And my mom was like a big Beatles fan too. So any Beatles related songs. We
that's great.
actually on her footstone, like we put lyrics to Let It Be, and I have them tattooed
Oh,
on me. Like,
oh my God.
yeah. So music
Beautiful.
for my mom is like that's a big thing. And after she had passed, like I have like this vivid memory of us being in the flower shop to pick out stuff for the funeral. And one or two of the songs that we had just put on that playlist, that CD, played while we were there. And I was like,
God.
lost it. And so um now my family and I, like once in a while, if like a song comes on the radio or like we hear it somewhere or like or just something happens, like we'll like send each other stuff. But
Oh,
yeah, definitely
it's like
music.
a little reminder that she's there with you.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I really I feel like some part of her energy like makes stuff like that happen. And I think the same thing about my dad. Like, um, because of that strong pull with music, with my mom, like when my dad first passed away, I was like, what the heck? What kind of signs do I get to expect from you, John? After my mom died, I actually started going to art therapy because
Oh.
I love to paint and all that stuff. I actually wanted to become an art teacher, but changed my major. And so, so one day while I was at therapy, I was explaining I have such a strong connection with music. And my mom, like, I have no idea, like, I haven't seen or felt a sign from my dad. And this was a little after he had passed away. And she's like, well, you guys like to hike together. You like to go outside. Like, I want to hike this weekend. Find something that you want to bring and we'll make art with it next time you're here.
Oh, that's a nice idea.
Okay. And I never in my life have seen like a red dragonfly. I didn't even know they existed. But
Oh, me neither.
there was, yeah, we went on a hike, me and my husband, and for a really long time, this red dragonfly would not stop following us. And we didn't think anything of that. But then afterward, we went and stopped at a restaurant that we had never been to. And we
Hmm.
sat down, and my husband was like, did you look around? And I was like, what? And I'm looking around and there was the theme of like they had dragonflies everywhere.
My God.
Yeah. And so when we realized that, a song from the playlist that my mom and like we had for my mom played while we were there. So like telling that story, I get full body chills.
Yes,
So that
you
was
must
like,
have been full of emotion.
yeah, so that I felt like that was her confirming, like, hey, idiot, like that is your dad.
Pay
And you
attention.
yeah.
Oh my God.
I see a dragonfly just in general, I kind of just am like, oh,
Wow.
what's up, dad? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think it stood out to us because of it was like the body of it was like this bright red color. It was I'll never forget. It was so cool.
Yeah. I wonder how rare those are. They must be rare.
Yeah.
Probably.
So those two things, I think, when I think of my parents or like get experiences like that, like I'm like, oh, what's up, guys?
Aw, so nice.
Yeah.
My dad was a huge Pink Floyd fan,
Hmm.
because he was 25 when he passed away. He had doodle notebooks and he wrote down Pink Floyd, Neil Young. So I would always listen to that music. And I
Yeah.
still do. And I saw Roger Waters from Pink Floyd like in concert 5 times. And once when I was
That's
8 months
awesome.
pregnant, I
That's
didn't know I
amazing.
was going to be 8 months pregnant when I bought the ticket, but I
Yeah.
was like, there is no way I'm missing this. So that was my daughter's first concert. Uh, when she was in my stomach. But yeah, that's so special. If you could talk to your parents one last time, what would you tell them or ask them?
Yeah, I've thought about this a lot, and I think knowing the both of them, if like whatever higher power or anything that people believe in, like I personally just feel like when somebody passes, like I think like a lot of part of their energy still remains, or something has to, like it's like what we just talked about. I don't think that is a coincidence, but just knowing them as people, I feel like they hopefully aren't holding guilt, but if they are, I would definitely say like it's okay. I don't hold resentment, and I don't hate them for dying the way they did, and I don't hate them for dealing with a disease as cruel and aggressive as addiction. And I would say like any guilt that you hold or had hold my whole life, like get rid of it. Time to let it go and just be at peace, and that I loved them, and I would never will never stop loving them, and that they will always be my parents.
That that reminds me of what a parent would say
Mm.
to their children, right? You've you've grown up so much that yeah, you're telling them it's okay. Do you have any advice that you would give to other survivors? Anything that maybe helped you or that you were able to figure out years later that you wish you knew sooner or anything like that?
Yeah, I think not, like I said before, not being afraid to ask for help, especially when it comes to mental health, like that can be a really big thing to go through in the beginning. And even afterward, like I found myself like trying to figure out like what grief meant to me, and how to deal with grief. And I would say like, don't be afraid of going to therapy. It's helped me so much, and I go to the same therapist still that I started going to right after my mom passed. And I've definitely taken some pauses where I'm like, oh, like I'm doing great. And
Mhm.
there'll be times where it's like, okay, like I need to go back. And I think just being truthful with yourself and other people about how you are. Another thing that, helps me and is celebrating their birthday, even though they're not here. Birthdays are like a big celebration, to, honor folks who are not here anymore and still consider that their day to celebrate them. And then for people who are here and the loved ones that you're celebrating with now, I have this conversation all the time with my husband, who doesn't really love celebrating his birthday, just because he's like, ah, I don't care that, like, I don't need a day that's all about me. But I think getting older is a privilege. Like with
Yeah.
my parents, they like I don't get to watch them get old and wrinkly. And I think celebrating the fact that you get to experience more years, on this planet is a big thing. And for some reason, that's always helped me with my grief, because yes, like I'm continuing life without them, but I get to experience so many great other things, and continue to live. And I think that's something special in itself. Like I still like for my dad's birthday, he loved vanilla bean ice cream. It had to be vanilla bean, just regular vanilla.
Oh,
We will buy vanilla bean ice cream and strawberries and have that on his birthday as like a treat because that's what he would have done on his birthday. So stuff like that has helped me in my process. Like they're not gone. Just because they're gone doesn't mean you can't continue to do stuff that they would have liked, you know. My future kids are never gonna get to know like face to face what their grandparents were like. So that, yeah, doing stuff like that matters to me now because it'll just help me tell the story of who they were. And yeah, I think it's a good thing and healthy thing to do.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And so I think it's so interesting that you did like art therapy. So, because there's all different types of therapy out there. What's
Yeah.
art therapy like? Like
Awesome.
you're in
So
front of an easel.
it's a lot of different options. So
Okay.
the woman I go to, she's amazing. I love her. The options are like, very broad. You can use watercolors, colored pencils, like just regular pencil, pen, paper, whatever. Like it,
Choose your own medium.
yeah. And
Okay.
what's great about it, who I go to, she supplies everything. If she doesn't have something, she'll buy it and you can use it in your next session. People go to her and they knit. Like there's so many different
Oh,
types
wow.
of, yeah. So that's a great thing about it. Like, and then honestly, like the past couple of months that I've been going, I haven't actually put like paint or pen to paper. You can just go and talk. Like it's not
Okay.
requirement. But when I first like lost my mom, it was so huge for me because I couldn't articulate my grief in a way that made sense, or like I'm not always great at figuring out what I want to say. I'm better when somebody prompts me with something. And so with art therapy, like I would go and she would be like, all right, this week we're going to tackle this. And like, you can draw however this thing makes you feel, whatever. In
Mhm.
doing so, art says a lot. And you like, sometimes you kind of surprise yourself because you're like, actually, now that I put it into a drawing or a painting, I can explain it better. It's a really cool thing. And you don't have to be artistic to go. Like
Yeah.
I thought of it because it was like a last effort. Finding the right therapist is like finding the right shoe. How people say, and it's so true because there were a few people who I tried to go to and it just wasn't working out. And I had gotten to a place where I know art therapy exists. I love art. I love to draw. I love to paint. Let me just give it a try. And she was literally the first person who popped up in my internet search. And I was like, "Meh, I'm just going to give it a go." And it worked out for me, thankfully.
Awesome. Yes.
So I would definitely recommend it to people who, even if you don't think you can draw or whatever, it's super great because if you're not great with your words but you
Yeah.
therapy, it's really helpful.
I guess like when you don't know where to begin and you
Yeah.
don't know exactly how you feel or how to articulate how you feel becomes a great tool to doing that. That's awesome. At
Mhm.
least for somebody maybe who's just going through the loss like recently,
Right.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Give it a try.
Is there anything else that you'd like to say or add or share?
I think having conversations like this are so important to people like us who lost a parent to overdose. It doesn't get talked about enough for children who are going through it. And if you are going through it, there are people like us.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did, and you'll join me again next week. Cass mentioned how she spoke in front of a crowd to tell her story at an event for International Overdose Awareness Day. Well, every year on August 31st, there are special events held all over the US, in case you're interested in getting involved. If you're looking for support, GRASP is a great resource, short for Grief Recovery After a Substance Abuse Passing. They're at grasphelp.org. This episode and its contents have not been sponsored in any way. Thank you again for listening, and take good care.